is a national championship game being played today between Oregon and Ohio State. Oregon a 7-point favorite still. I don't know. That 6.5? Is it down to 6.5? All right, 6.5. Let's check in right now with a guy who's covered the Ohio State Buckeyes for years out of Cleveland. He is Doug Lesmerises. He works for Cleveland.com. He hangs around the Buckeyes all the time. Hey, Doug, how are you?
I'm good. I'm Buckeyes, That's what I do.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us on such a busy day as well. Is this point spread too big? I mean, after what we saw Ohio State do to Alabama, should Oregon be such a heavy favorite against Ohio State?
I think it does feel a little more like a pick'em game. With what Ohio State did, I felt like that was a little bit of a reset on what kind of team Ohio State is when they beat Alabama that way. Oregon is the team that is dealing with injuries. They lost a receiver in the Florida State game. They've had a receiver suspended. Ohio State's on its third-string quarterback, but they've kind of dealt with that and moved on. So it feels like things are trending Ohio State's way. I thought maybe the line would come down a little more, but then I'm also waiting for, Marcus Mariota to throw 3 touchdown passes in the first 10 minutes and everybody say, oh, that's why Oregon's the favorite. But I do think this feels a little closer than 7 points.
Hey, Doug, despite the fact that Urban Meyer has won national championships at Florida, despite the fact he, in a very quick time, turned around the Ohio State program, which was having its struggles, despite the fact he did an unbelievable job at Utah, do we still underestimate Urban Meyer and his ability to coach?
They don't in Ohio. I don't know. I mean, I think if he gets this and joins Nick Saban as guys to win national titles with 2 programs, that's a big deal. And the fact, as you mentioned, that he's done it everywhere. He's never had somewhere where it didn't go well. I think he's on the cusp of being one of those guys that you start talking about, with basically some of the real greats if they get this one. Now in the Big Ten, they hadn't beaten a lot of good teams. They had a great record here, started off 24-0, but who did they beat? But now that they have that Alabama win, if they get this done, I think you start looking at what he's done at Ohio State in a different way. And really, he was as responsible as anybody for the rise of the SEC when this all started in 2006. So I do think people are going to start realizing what Urban Meyer is.
Woody Page, and thank you for joining me and Les. It's a pleasure for us to have you with us. But you just brought up something I'd like to address: the urban renewal program that worked when I first met him. He was at Utah, and he took a bad team there and turned it around. He went to Florida, as you just mentioned, and he turned that into a national championship program. He went into Ohio State, and they haven't lost a conference game, if I remember correctly. But I would ask you this question: do you feel like, in a way, that this is gravy, that this is kind of unexpected for Ohio State, that they're going into this game playing with house money and thinking, we were planning on being a national championship team next year, that they're ahead of the curve of where they were planning to be?
Yeah, I think they really are. I thought last year was a year for them because they had a lot of really good seniors and some juniors, guys that are in the NFL right now. Bradley Roby, one of them. I thought last year was a shot. I thought next year was a shot because they have a really, really good second-year class. Their quarterback, J.T. Barrett, that played this year, Joey Bosa, who's going to be a top 10 pick someday. That's the group leading this team. And so for them to get it done this year, it's only going to get better from here, you think, because this still is not quite a full Urban Meyer team. The senior class on this team are guys who were recruited by Jim Tressel. They're starting to shape the roster to what Urban wants to do offensively, the kind of guys he wants. There are obviously some really good seniors on this team that Jim Tressel did bring in, and Jim Tressel won a lot here. But sort of the idea of if Urban Meyer's doing this now in a year like this when it looked like maybe a down year, plus they had the quarterback injuries, what's he going to do in the years to come when he has a full team that's all the guys he wants?
Doug, let's talk specifically tonight's game. A lot of people look at Oregon and say, oh, my goodness, the speed is just exceptional. How is Ohio State going to stay with Oregon from a speed standpoint? But the way I'm looking at it, Ohio State not only has speed, they've got size that Oregon doesn't have. How do you see this game playing out?
The run game for Ohio State, I think, is going to be the deciding factor. Ezekiel Elliott's a guy who maybe didn't get a lot of attention in the Big Ten this year. They had so many other good running backs. He's really come on. He's a really good running back right now. They do have speed on the outside, but if Ohio State can run the ball consistently, They move fast, so they won't necessarily grind out 8-minute drives. But that run game looks very tough to stop, and Oregon at times hasn't stopped the run. I don't know that Ohio State's going to stop Marcus Mariota either, but I think if the Ohio State run game can get going, I think Ohio State has a chance to score with Oregon. And like you said, Ohio State does have pretty good speed, but then they've got some, they call them the slobs. They've got some big guys up front. On the offensive line, their defensive line, led by Joey Bosa, is pretty athletic. I think, athletically, they do, other than at quarterback, they match up pretty well with Oregon.
State averaged, I believe, 45 rushing plays per game this season. That's the way you slow down Oregon, is that if you could maintain control of the ball, they can't take advantage of their speedsters. Oregon's without 3. They just lost their top receiver because of a marijuana test, a positive test. And I think that you're absolutely right, Doug, that if they can run the football, I believe they have an advantage with their coach. They have an advantage with their running game, and they have the advantage of a lot of those guys have played together for a long time. And we have seen a quarterback that has come along in the last 2 games that I think has astounded a lot of people, that he could develop so quickly in the starting role.
Yeah, I did not expect that from Cardale Jones, for him to do that in the Big Ten championship and against Alabama. When Braxton Miller went down and J.T. Barrett came in this year, J.T. Barrett was a big-time recruit. He was going to be the starter eventually, maybe not yet. Cardale Jones was a little different situation. So the fact that he's proven himself makes me look at Ohio State a different way. The only thing, though, I think we do have to go back to Marcus Mariota for Oregon. Ohio State hasn't seen a quarterback like him this year. There aren't great quarterbacks in the Big Ten. There aren't great dual-threat quarterbacks in the Big Ten. So he's going to be a different kind of test. No team sees a quarterback like that. He's the best player in the country. But I do think there's the chance that he is just so good, even with some guys missing. They still have other playmakers to fill in. Oregon had 6 different guys catch 20 passes this year. I think there's a chance Marcus Mariota could still be dominant. But like you said, the best way to try to beat him is not let him have the ball in his hands, to keep the ball in Ezekiel Elliott's hands for Ohio State.
Hey, Doug, really appreciate you giving us the time. I know it's a busy day for you. Enjoy the game, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Very good. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, here's Doug Lesmerises of Cleveland.com. Read all his stuff.